What's up, everybody? Welcome to the weekend roundup. A little bit strange not having Premier League to watch and talk about here, but I still want to start in Europe and specifically with what is happening with Bayern Munich. Third consecutive draw in the Bundesliga, this one coming against Stuttgart. This is Bayern's worst start to the season since 2010-11. That predates their run of 10 consecutive Bundesliga titles. That was the last time they have dropped this many points this early in the season. And yes, on one hand, this draw came as a result of a penalty Stuttgart got in the final minutes of the game from a Matthias de Ligt mistake. But on the other hand, you needed some disallowed goals and some help from the woodwork to even come away with this point. And you also needed a terrific goal from Jamal Musiala to restore order and get that lead back, which ultimately they once again relinquished and had to settle for the point. There's a lot of negative things I'm going to get to here, but before I jump into that, Jamal Musiala has been sensational this season for Bayern. Arguably the best player in that entire league. He is right there. After you get past Haaland and Mbappe, to me, he is in that next group of the most promising young players in the world. He has been spectacular. But this ultimately was still a draw, still incredibly disappointing. And it's kind of strange because my thought process after the Gladbach game was they've been destroying people. I think they outscored their first three opponents in the Bundesliga 15-1, if I remember the number correctly. And it requires a historic performance from Jan Sommer in goal to even get a point. They make one mistake, Gladbach pounces on it. 99 times out of 100, Bayern's going to win that game. I wasn't concerned at all. I still had some questions about where they're going to stack up in the overall European hierarchy. But that didn't faze me. And then you play Union Berlin. Not a great performance, but also one of the places, if you're looking at the schedule, where you might expect to see a draw. So that one didn't faze me all that much either. But now this is 3 in a row. And this is the second bad performance in a row. And it really just goes back to the same questions and the same things you saw last season. There were clear flaws because you can't measure this team based on the Bundesliga. And yes, they are not winning the league right now. I do think there's a chance Dortmund finds a way to hang with them. But my skepticism from that comes more with my hesitation in actually believing Dortmund can put together 34 performances that can keep pace with Bayern than it does Bayern dropping enough points to keep Dortmund in it. But at the end of the day, they're just so much better than everybody else in Germany. You can't look at their Bundesliga performance as an indicator of where they are when it comes to Europe as a whole. Because they're probably, 90% chance at least they win the league this season. We're not at the point where that is a concern. But you saw some confusing, eye-raising results last season. Still won the Bundesliga with points to spare. But then Villarreal happened. And it is very clear, based on how things have gone so far, those problems, those cracks have not been addressed. They brought in some new pieces over the summer. They haven't made quite as much of an impact as I expected them to, specifically when you take away Sadio Mane. The other sort of rotational pieces haven't exactly clicked into gear yet. And there is the other part of this, which is Robert Lewandowski is not there. And I've said this before. Your margin of error just becomes thinner when you don't have perhaps the best finisher in the world on your team. And you didn't replace him. You replaced him with a player who can play striker and a very good attacker. But you did not replace the things Robert Lewandowski does and the way he plays. And so now you don't have that top 3-ish player in the world, perhaps more, perhaps a little bit less, depending on how you view things, to cover up these cracks. And so what you're seeing is 3 consecutive disappointing and or shaky performances. Yes, you had the Inter game in there, but to me that is much more about the fact that Inter has just not shown up against any good team they've played so far this season than it is being able to point to that as a reason to say Bayern is going to be fine. It is time to be concerned about this and to remove Bayern from that top tier. They weren't in it last season, and I feel like people were getting to a point, and I was starting to buy in a little bit, that they might actually be back in that tier. And they're simply not. Now, they could run off 25 consecutive wins, and we're having a different conversation by the time we get done with the World Cup and we're into the knockout stage of the Champions League. It is possible. But right now, they are not at the same level as Manchester City or Real Madrid. And I am very, very intrigued to see what happens when they start playing Barcelona. Oh, and PSG, throwing them in there too. There is a group of teams that I refuse to put Bayern in with the way things are going. These draws are, the first one I was willing to completely dismiss, like I said. But this is 3 in a row. This is not, Leverkusen, Gladbach, Dortmund. And Union Berlin has been very good. So that one, you can throw them into that category too. But this is, with all due respect, Stuttgart. And you're allowed to have a game like this every once in a while. It's soccer, things happen. But to have this after the other two, Bayern simply are not the team they were 2-3 seasons ago. And Julian Nagelsmann has his work to cut out for him to try and figure out a way to get this back to a point where they can win a Champions League. Because right now, I don't think they can. And that, of course, is the measuring stick. And like I said, you can't put too much. Everything is viewed within the European hierarchy. These draws don't mean too much to me yet in terms of the Bundesliga title race, because Dortmund have not been good enough to really capitalize on it. But when you see this consistent poor performance, that starts raising questions about what can they do in Europe. And the final thing I'll say here, what happened to the Champions League last season never happened to Bayern. And that is a close to literal statement. You go look at who they have been knocked out in the Champions League by. They're not always the best team in the competition. They're not always one of the best 3 or 4 teams. But they never lose to teams they have no business getting eliminated by. They lose to the best teams in the world. And last season it was Villarreal, and now here we are with this start. You could see the cracks, you could see the flaws, and they are on full display so far this season too. It is getting really hard to dismiss this as some kind of fluke or just a weird patch of games and expect Bayern to come out on the other end of this looking like a top 4 or 5 team in the world, because right now they're simply not there. The other game in Europe I want to mention, just because it was so bizarre, Juventus playing Salernitana at home are losing 2-0 at halftime as their struggles continue. Leonardo Bonucci equalizes in stoppage time. Arkadiusz Milik then gets what he thinks is a winner. He takes his shirt off. It's a second yellow, so he's got a red. VAR goes in and disallows the goal. Then there's a scuffle of sorts as the ref is trying to sort all this out. Juan Cuadrado gets a red. Max Allegri gets a red. And it ultimately ends 2-2 and Juventus drop 2 more points. It's the same story. I mean, you're getting goals from center backs in this game. Weston McKennie was the one who scored against PSG. They are not creating chances for their attacking players. Their attacking players aren't scoring goals. And when they are scoring goals, it's Dusan Vlahovic pulling magic out of a hat on free kicks and stuff like that. They are simply not good offensively right now. This is nothing new. I wanted to talk about this game because it's one of the more bizarre endings you'll ever see. Feel free to go check out the highlights if you want to watch it for yourself. On to Major League Soccer. A few things to highlight here as well. Chicharito missed another penalty in the LA Galaxy's draw with Nashville. This, of course, comes following the Panenka disaster, which also cost the Galaxy crucial points. Now, they do get a second penalty, I believe rightly, had no issue with that being overturned, and Ricky Puig steps up and converts it. So they get a good point in Nashville, but these drop points coming from Chicharito's penalty kicks could very well be the difference between them making the playoffs and not. And I didn't get to talk about the Panenka when it happened, so I just want to bring it all into the conversation here. You're Chicharito, you're the captain, you want to take that penalty, fine. Why you're trying a Panenka in that situation, I have no idea. It was a selfish, stupid decision. Okay, so you want to make up for that. So you decide to take another one. Considering how his teammates must have reacted to him taking a Panenka in the situation he took it, you simply have to make that next PK. End of story. If you are going to say, I want to take it, you have to convert it, and you have to look confident every step of the way. He did neither. And there are some players who I am more than happy to sort of ride with a bad stretch from the penalty spot. It happens. What continues to confuse me is these guys on teams with a variety of capable penalty takers who continue to find ways to take these penalties when historically they are simply not good penalty takers. And the other guy that comes to mind that I've talked about is Riyad Mahrez. Go look at his numbers in the Premier League taking penalties. And yet, on a team with all of those capable guys, he still finds a way to take some, and unsurprisingly, he's missed a couple crucial ones. And Chicharito, go look at his numbers. Whether it was in Spain, I believe he was 1-for-1 in the Premier League with Manchester United, but that's one penalty. And look at his conversion rate with the LA Galaxy. On a team which at any moment in time could have Jovic on the field, Douglas Costa, I would feel fine taking a penalty. I know that hasn't gone perfectly this season, but I wouldn't feel bad about that option. Ricky Puig just proved he can do it. You've got Victor Vasquez. I mean, you can go down the line. And that's not even to mention Crabal and Grandsir on the wing, who wouldn't be my first choices, but I don't feel horrible about that either. There are plenty of guys on this team capable of taking penalties. And you as the captain, I'm all for him wanting the responsibility. But after the Panenka, it was time to just look at this and say, we need to get this job done. Maybe if you can sort of regroup and get yourself in a better mental headspace at the penalty spot, you have a discussion about Chicharito being your PK taker for the playoffs. But his track record suggests it was not a good idea for him to take that penalty. And you do it right after the disaster that was the Panenka. You are starting to lose the confidence of this team and of your teammates by continuing to do that and not giving the responsibility to somebody else. And it might cost them a playoff spot. Right now, they're 3 points behind 7th place Real Salt Lake with a game in hand. Maybe they find a way to sneak in. Maybe they don't. But I find it hard to believe in some way, shape, or form these missed penalties are going to just go away. It is going to be a talking point when we look back on this season, regardless of how it ends. And the other part of this, too, is the Seattle Sounders came back to life this weekend, so they're right behind the Galaxy pushing as well. And I really thought the way the Galaxy responded against the Sounders though it wasn't a good performance, was putting them in a position where they were going to get this done because they were in such a good position from a schedule, games in hand, standings perspective. And they simply didn't get the points they should have had because of these missed penalties. So now you are in real trouble because you have 7 teams you need to be better than, and the Sounders behind you who could easily win out the rest of the way and put a ton of pressure on you from behind you in the table as well. Other thing I want to mention here, well, it's really sort of 2 different parts connected to the same game. LAFC go down super early, go down a man. Ryan Hollingshead gets sent off in his return to Dallas. But Chito Arango scores, and LAFC are ahead at halftime, playing 30-plus minutes of the first half, 11v10. But then Jesus Ferreira worked some brilliance. I mean, there is no other way to describe what he did in the final minutes of this game. He scored not 1, but 2 clever set-piece goals. Caught LAFC off guard on the first one, and just found an opening on the second one and perfectly executed that free kick. He now has 18 non-penalty goals. That is the most in Major League Soccer. I'm still not sold on him as the lockdown number 9 starter for the U.S. men's national team. But he has had a terrific season and is showing a maturity. I mean, he's wearing the captain's armband. And an awareness and an intelligence level that is well beyond his years. He deserves an incredible amount of credit no matter what role he ends up playing in Qatar. He is having a phenomenal season. And he also did the Philadelphia Union a massive favor by completing this comeback by himself, because the Union are now in control of the Supporters' Shield. From a points per game perspective, after they demolished Orlando, as they do most teams it seems like they play these days, they now, points per game, most in Major League Soccer. Now, LAFC are still right there. This is far from over. But the Union are in control of the Supporters' Shield. It would be their second in 3 seasons, which is absolutely remarkable. All of this kind of connected, which was sort of strange, because I wanted to highlight I wanted to highlight the Supporters' Shield, and they just sort of happened to go together here. But we've got everything you could possibly ask for. Positioning within the playoffs, the playoff race itself, and the Supporters' Shield. Nothing has been decided. And we're, 3, 4, 5 games, depending on the team, away from the end of the regular season. This is going to be a phenomenal 3 or so weeks here as MLS wraps up its regular season, gets ready for the playoffs. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And you can also follow all of my written work, both on Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com, and on Medium as well. We will see you next time.